In this section, we're going to talk about the psychology of money. There's a little joke that a group of people is waiting at the bank to do all kinds of transactions, get money and so on. All of a sudden, two robbers come in. They point their guns, they try to rob the bank, they do all kinds of things. Unintentionally, one of them, as they move, puts his mask out. And all of a sudden, his face is visible. He puts his mask back on, and he turns to the person next to him and says, "Did you see my face?" The person says, "Yes." He shoots him dead. Turns to the next person, says, "Did you see my face?" The person says, "Yes." Shoots him dead. He turns to the third person, a woman, and he says, "Did you see my face?" And the woman says, "I did not, but my husband did." What is the psychology of money? When we think about money, money is all about opportunity cost. Every time we buy something, we buy a sandwich, it's about what we're not going to be able to do in the future. If we buy one thing, the money would come up from somewhere. But this opportunity cost is something that is very hard for us to envision, very hard for us to think about, very hard for us to actually realize the trade-off that we're making. So instead, what do we do as human beings? We look at all kinds of shortcuts, all kinds of other things that we could do with money to make us feel that we're making the right decision. This is why we do things like we care about the method of payment that we're using. We look at relativity. We look at relative prices. We do all kinds of other things that are not perfectly rational, but at least makes us feel that we're making the right decision. And my hope is that by the end of this section, you will not just better understand the psychology of money, you might actually be able to make slightly better decisions with your own money. Hi, today I want to talk a little bit about the psychology of money. Now, this might seem strange because after all, we use money all the time. We use it day in and day out, over time, lots of kind of payments, cash, credit cards, and so on. And because we use it so much, we might think that we're experts in using money. But I want us to question this. I want us to go back a little bit, and I want us to ask, do we really understand how money works? Do we really kind of figure out how it works, what kind of tricks it have, how we use it, how it influences what we're willing to do? But before we say some bad things about money, my mother always told me that it's always nice to say something good to start with. So let's talk about some good things. So money is an incredible invention. Just think to yourself, how would the world look like without money? We would probably have to do barters all the time. We might grow broccoli, and somebody else might raise chickens, and we would have to take our broccoli and go to the chicken farmer and try to trade how much broccoli for how much chicken. Do they want some broccoli today or not? The world would be incredibly difficult if we had to do barters on a domain-by-domain, in a domain-by-domain way. Now, what does money do? Money creates a central mechanism that everything could be traded off with. We can trade broccoli for money and then money for chicken and so on and so forth. So now we don't need to worry about all of those exchanges. We could just do one exchange with money. So from that perspective, it's amazing to think about what an invention money has been and how it helps the market operate in a much more efficient and wonderful way. I think it's at the level of the wheel. Like it's such an important invention for society. Okay. So now that we've said something good about money, let's start examining the bad sides about money and all kind of the challenges that we have. So psychologically, what is money about and how should we think about money? Well, money is all about opportunity cost. Every time you spend $2.50 on a cup of coffee, what should you be thinking to yourself? You should be thinking about what else could you have done instead? Where's this money coming from? Would it have been best spent on a cup of tea today and a cookie tomorrow, assuming the tea and the cookie sum to the same amount? Should you save it for a long time and go to the movies in 15 years, or maybe buy a slightly different stereo in 35 years from now? Every time you're buying something, It's about what are you giving up and what else could you do if you did not take this action. Now, of course, thinking about money this way is incredibly difficult. You can ask yourself, when was the last time that you thought about opportunity cost, that you made those trade-offs? In fact, we went to a Toyota dealership a few years ago. We went to a dealership and we got people who were just about to buy a new car. And we said, please tell us, what are you giving up? If you go ahead and buy this car, what would you not be able to do? And people gave us no answer. Why? Because nobody thought about it. We kind of stumped them. You know, what do you mean something would give up? But then we insisted. We said, hey, something will have to give up. What are you going to give up? And the most people would give us, the most they told us, is that they buy a Toyota, they can't buy a Honda. Which means that they made a substitution in the same time frame, in the same category. Now what people should have said is that this amount is equivalent to what I would have to give up by 2 weeks of vacation for the next 4 years and 700 lattes and 37 books. Something like that, that is across time and across many categories. But the fact is it's incredibly hard to work this way, so we don't. Now, there's another thing to think about money, which is the way that we have money functioning in our environment makes it more difficult. So imagine, for example, that I was in charge of your finances, and every week I would give you an envelope with cash. And this was the cash that you had to spend during that week, and you had nothing else. What would happen? In the beginning of the week, you would feel that you could pay for a cab and buy a sandwich and get beer and get a new shirt. But as the money, as the amount went down and down and down, you would realize your trade-offs to a higher degree. You would say, oh, if I buy this, I can't buy that, and the trade-offs would become much more clear. Now, that would work out if I gave you money for a week, and it would only probably really kick in the last few days. What if I gave you money for the whole year? Now it will be really difficult to think about this. Or what if the world looks like the current economy, in which I gave you credit cards, and I gave you student loans and mortgages and car payments. And now, in that environment, what would have been the horizon of your payment? You see, if you get an envelope with a fixed amount of money, that's your horizon. It's easy to see the cost and benefit. It's easy to see the trade-offs that you're making. But if you don't have a clear horizon, it's saving for retirement, not really clear how long I would live. I have all these student loans and I have this mortgage. The horizon is so unclear, the trade-offs that we're making are less clear. So the point is that we are supposed to be thinking about money in a trade-off analysis. We're supposed to think about the opportunity cost, or what's sometimes called the shadow value of price, the shadow value of money. But it's hard to do anyway, and the financial environment that we've created makes it even harder to think this way. So, what do we know in general? When people face a problem that is too difficult to compute, too difficult to figure out the right way, we take some shortcuts. We figure out other ways to do it, not the right ways, but at least some ways. And this is what I want to talk about next. This cartoon clearly indicates the idea of opportunity cost, not in the domain of money, but in another domain. It says, we found we really missed going to the theater and eating in nice restaurants, so we gave our kids away. And of course, kids are the ultimate opportunity cost. You get kids, there's lots and lots of things you can't do, but even with kids, many people don't think about it up front, about what they're going to give up. Here is one experiment that very elegantly illustrates this problem that we have with thinking about opportunity cost. So imagine that you were given a choice, and you said, would you prefer to buy a Sony stereo system for $700 or a Pioneer system for $1,000? And basically what you're being asked in this question is, how do you value the quality of the two stereos compared to the financial savings of $300? How much is the Pioneer better than the Sony, and how useful is the $300 for you? That's one setup. And in that particular setup, lots and lots of people chose the Pioneer system. In the second setup, it was given in a slightly different way. It says, would you like to pay $1,000 for the Sony stereo or $1,000 for the Pioneer stereo? But if you pay $1,000 for the Sony stereo, you also get $300 to spend on CDs and DVDs. Now think about it. This second phrasing, you take the same $300 you had before, when you only spent $700 on the Sony station, on the Sony stereo. But now this $300 goes only for CDs and DVDs. From a rational perspective, the second case is less appealing, because the Sony includes $300 you can only spend on CDs and DVDs, where in the first case you could have taken these $300 and spent on anything else you want. But what happens? Now the Sony stereo looks even more appealing than the previous case. Why is it? It's because when you think about the representation of $300, right? Sony for $700 plus $300, this representation doesn't include a lot. It's a general fuzzy topic. What exactly am I getting with $300? But in fact, what you could do is you could take these $300 and you could make them concrete in one domain. And while generally they'll be worth less than more, now that you have one domain, you can think about them in a more concrete way, and you can actually get more excited about it. I'll give you one more example of this. Can you imagine that you like coffee? And I'm assuming most of you like coffee, and let's say that the price for a cappuccino is $3. Can you imagine that I could get you to do something for me for a cappuccino that you would not be willing to do for $3? And if that's the case, and many people report that this is the case, that means that the representation of a cappuccino is somehow worth more in your mind than the representation of $3. Even though you could take the $3 and buy a cappuccino, or you could buy all kinds of other things, the representation, the hedonic value, the emotional appeal that we have from a cappuccino is higher than the emotional appeal for $3. So what this, going back to the Sony and the Pioneer example, what it suggests is that we just have money in the equation. It's not as valuable because it's about opportunity cost. It's general. We don't know how to think about it. And because of that, we could take that amount of money, make it specific, make it concrete, make it less valuable from economic perspective, but nevertheless have a higher perceived value for it, and with that, change how people make decisions.